Good afternoon, councillors and members of the public. Welcome to our South Planning Committee for February. We are not expecting a fire drill, so if the alarm does sound, I ask you to leave by one of the side exits, which are on the left and right, or through the two doors that you will like to. This meeting will be recorded and then uploaded onto YouTube following the meeting. Therefore, any members of the public present should be aware that you may be recorded. If there is any reason that you object to this or have not been recorded, you can make yourself known to Steph on the end here, our administrator, who will have that for you. May I ask you switch your phones off or have silent for the duration of the meeting. The planning application still be taken in the following order. I will announce the agenda number and the item number. The planning officer will then introduce the application with any relevant updates and provide a visual presentation to aid members' understanding of the context of the application. We then call on public speakers to present in accordance with the public speaking arrangements. I will then ask for members or officers if they have any points of clarification or points that may be applications that have been raised by the members of the public. I will then ask members if they have any technical questions of officers. I will then move into the debate. The whole committee will discuss and debate the current application. Members may then seek further items of clarification and any particular points from the officers regarding the application or the points raised by any of the speakers. Okay, so we will start with agenda item 1, which is apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We have received no apologies for absence today.
Thank you very much. Item 2 is the minutes from the previous meeting. So you all have a copy of the minutes from the meeting held on the 28th of January. Any comments on those meeting minutes? Let's proceed.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, on page 20 in the agenda, under the resolution, in the middle of it, it says that the committee asked for a pedestrian crossing and access point from the A30. I think it's just an access point from the A30 because it's on the same side. It's just a limiting error. I think planners understood.
Yeah, the minutes have been amended now.
So can I just check the minutes online? I've got that amendment in them, and the set I've got here to sign also been amended.
You haven't got the set there, but yes, they have an amendment.
Okay, so are members happy for me to sign a set copy of those minutes with those amendments? Thank you very much. Move on to agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Can I ask if any members in the room, please brace yourself, have any declarations of any interest on any item on the agenda? I'll start Councillor Seam and one away.
Thank you, Chair. Application 24-02986 listed building consent regarding ground floor of 31 Princess Street. The applicant is a fellow councillor, is known to me, but I have an interest which is declared as under the Localism Act. However, I have been granted an exemption to take part in the meeting. I also have a personal interest in that. I do know the applicant, but we don't usually socialise together. It's a similar sort of relationship with one of the other members in the room.
Thank you. Councillor Curley.
Thank you, Chair. So I'd like to declare interest on the same agenda item. I'd like to declare that I am also a member of the Liberal Democrats. However, I'm a member of Glastonbury and Somerton Liberal Democrats, not Yeovil, so I don't believe it is a pecuniary interest. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Beth.
Yes, declaring interest, but I have a dispensation which is granted for that. It's the same as the others.
Thank you, Councillor Stanton.
Yeah, the same consideration. I do have a dispensation as the other councillors. I do know the applicant personally, who is a neighbour of mine, and I have an interest in being a member of the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, Councillor Page.
Thank you, Chair. I'm also a member of the Liberal Democrats, but a member of the Glastonbury and Somerton branch. I haven't applied for a dispensation. Came too late, so I don't know whether I'm allowed to stay or not.
I'll ask the for some advice on that for you just a second.
Thank you.
Councillor Kendall.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm a member of the Yeovil Liberal Democrats and I've got personal interest. I've applied for this dispensation, but I haven't heard back, so I'm.
Yeah, Councillor Kendall, I'm pretty sure that that's been granted.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mrs. Kenton.
Thank you, Chair. I also am a member of the Young Democrats and am applying for a dispensation.
Thank you. And myself, as a member of the Yoga branch of the Liberal Democrats, I have applied for a dispensation and that's been granted. Thanks for Patrick.
I just say ditto, Chairman. Member of the Liberal Democrats and have dispensation.
Excellent, thank you. So can I just hand you over to Jill, who's our legal officer today, just to one briefly explain what the dispensation that seven of us have been given is just for members of the public, and then secondly, just to clarify Councillor Page's question before I do, Councillor Osborne.
Thank you. I just like to declare the absence of I'm the division member for Ilminster, and there's a tree preservation order application. Last item on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So a dispensation for members of the public is where we have the situation where so many members of the committee might be affected by having to declare an interest and normally leave the room. We are able to give them dispensation to remain and stay on various grounds as set out in legislation, including that without a dispensation, the number of persons prohibited might render the meeting inappropriate, or the political balance on the committee would be so upset as to potentially alter the outcome of a vote. So those are the sorts of reasons why dispensations are granted. This is a dispensation relating to a pecuniary interest because the yoga constituency party had some interest in the premises, but it's a collective interest as members of the group rather than a personal one. Those are the reasons why the dispensation has been granted. Where members are not members of the yoga constituency group, then they don't have that same personal pecuniary interest.
Yeah, place the seat.
Chairman, if I could just ask the legal officer to clarify what the Constitution says about applications made by members of the council and the ability to handle this through officers in a neutral way.
The scheme of delegations in the Constitution is very clear that normally this application would be one that would be dealt with by the Chief Planning Officer under delegated powers, but because the applicant is councillor, it has to come to committee.
Thank you. So just for committee reference, everyone in the room will be permitted to remain for that application except Councillor Messenger, who hasn't applied for dispensation, so will need to leave the room as a pecuniary. Councillor Messenger is.
That's been said.
My apologies, I've lost sight of the border there and moved you across into Yeovil. I'm not sure if that's something you would like to happen or not. Please accept my apologies, and we can all remain in the room, which is really good. Okay, after probably the longest declaration of interest that we've had so far, we'll move on to agenda item 4, which is public question time. Steph, are there any questions from members of the public?
There have been no members of the public registered to speak under this item, Chair.
Thank you very much. So we move on to our first application, which is agenda item 5. This is planning application 19//01053, full land at Thorhill, Tapworth Road, Chard. Proposed residential development for the erection of 94 dwellings, confirmation of vehicle access from Tapworth Road and associated works. I will hand you over to Jane, who is the planning officer for the presentation.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to take you through this full planning application for 94 dwellings, formation of access and associated works at Thorhill, Tapworth Road, Chard. So this application was previously approved by a predecessor committee, subject to section 106 back in August 2020. It was then held up by phosphates. The solution has now been endorsed by Somerset Ecology and Natural England, so the application is being brought back to committee today. And this slide shows the site's location with the boundary of the application site shown in red. The site is located on the southern urban edge of Chard. It's a sloping field bounded by hedgerows with some trees forming the northern boundary tree belt. You've got the A35 and Tapworth Road running along the site to the west. The play area for the Snow Range site is to the north. That site's nearly built out now. The Holby residential area to the east, another allocated housing site to the immediate south, and open countryside to the west. This is just an aerial view showing the site. So just on some site photos, and this slide shows the view from within the site looking out towards the east. This one shows views from within the site looking to the south and west. Views looking towards the orchard and the Holby residential area. And this is the view looking south along the Tapworth Road to the site boundary. This slide shows the proposed master plan, which includes 94 new houses and a mix of 1-bed flats, 2 and 3 and 4-bed houses. It includes 19% affordable housing, equating to 18 dwellings due to viability, which I'll come back to. The main access is to be taken on Tapworth Road, as shown here. The open space area has been positioned on the eastern boundary with footpath connections through to the site next door, so that potentially in the future it could form part of a much larger open space and play area should the adjacent site come forward. Such attenuation basin shown below that. The footpath link into the Snowdon Grange site has been moved to the northwest corner of the site to connect into the footpaths that are now laid out on the other side, and the Holby track goes to the public footpath link, which I'll come back to. So there have been some minor amendments to the master plan since the previous resolution, mostly in response to comments raised by local residents and consulting, which I'll come back to. It's been slightly adjusted to increase the number of 3-bed properties, and house types have been refreshed. Technical documents have been updated due to the passage of time, including drainage, transport and ecology assessments. Key considerations are listed out here. I won't read through those, but clearly there are other detailed matters covered within the committee report, which members will have read. So today I'm going to focus on the aspects that have been updated since the previous resolution and other matters raised in recent consultation. So just touching on the principle of the development, as shown here, outlined in blue, and the site remains allocated for housing within the local plan. It's part of the Child Strategic Growth Area. As such, the principle remains in accordance with the adopted local plan. As members will be well aware, due to the lack of 5-year land supply, the NPPF's tilted balance is engaged, and we are required to grant permission unless any adverse impacts will significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. A viability assessment was submitted with the original planning application, which was assessed by the district valuer, who concluded the application could only deliver 19% affordable housing and still deliver on its other obligations. District valuer has recently confirmed that this position still stands. So just moving on to moving on to design and appearance. This slide shows an example of one of the street scenes fronting onto Tapworth Road. As you can see, the properties are of a fairly traditional cottage style with a variety of materials, including stone, render and red brick frontages. A mixture of hedgerows, walls and fences are incorporated as boundary treatments, with a number of new trees included to line the main streets. This is another of the street scenes through an internal section of the site. You can see some of the stone fronted buildings in landmark positions on the key street corners. This slide shows some examples of some of the 3- and 4-bed house types, with some variety of roof lines and traditional door and window features. These are the 1-bed flats and examples of the 2-bed semis. Overall, proposed design and appearance has been planning conditions will be required for full details of external materials, boundary treatments and landscape planting to be submitted for approval. So moving on to highways matters, the previous transport assessment and development plan has been updated The new junction on Tapworth Road remains unchanged from the previous layout. The speed limit will be reduced to 30 miles an hour across the frontage. The internal highways layout has been improved since the previous layout, and the section 106 will secure contributions towards improving 6 local pedestrian crossing points by adding tactile paving and drop curves. Following the amendments, no further objections are raised by the Highway Authority. So, as mentioned, the location for the footpath link into the Snowden Grange site next door has been moved to the northwest corner of the site. Summerfields have agreed with Tillier Homes that they will deliver this short stretch of footpath, which will connect up to the existing footpath network at the top of the play area, as shown here. This will provide a benefit for both sites and other residents in the area that will enable pedestrians to walk safely between the two sites rather than along the Tapworth Road, which has narrow pavements at this point. This slide shows that these new links will provide a continuous footpath network from Thorhill through into Snowden Grange, which then leads along to the larger Ashcroft Children's Play area further to the north and onto the bus stops on Borton Road and on into town. One of the main concerns from local residents on the previous layout is the proposal for the agricultural field access to become a new public footpath into Holbeer, which is a private unadopted road without pavements. Following various discussions with the Highway Authority and taking on board residents' feedback, this footpath link has now been removed from the updated layout. The track will be secured off with a fence and the garden of Block 55 extended in front of it. In terms of residential amenity, some of the residents of the existing bungalows along the orchard have raised concerns that the new properties will be overbearing and cause overshadowing. As discussed in some detail in the report, a number of changes have been made to the layout along this boundary, as shown in the second image here. All the new houses have been pulled back away from the boundary to provide greater setback distance. The distances now range from 16 metres to 20 metres between the new and existing elevations for the closest properties. The existing hedgerow boundary will remain within the private demise of the orchard properties, and there'll be a new boundary fence along the edge of the new gardens as well. There'll be no upfloor side windows on these new elevations, and where there are, obscure glazing will be required and where appropriate. So it is acknowledged that the rear outlook of these properties will clearly change with this development. However, this is a long-standing housing allocation, and following the improvements, we consider this relationship to be acceptable. A small electricity substation has been introduced since the previous layout to ensure there's enough power to the site to meet latest building regulations, for example, electric vehicle charging points. Concerns have been raised by Chartertown Council about this being too close to properties. My understanding from the applicant's utility provider is that this particular design, housed with insulated reinforced concrete, needs to be a minimum of 3 metres away from the nearest property due to noise, which is as shown on this layout. The Environmental Health Officer has been consulted and not raised any objection in this regard. Just moving on to ecology, the ecological impact assessment has been updated. The existing boundary trees and hedgerows are to be protected and maintained, apart from the short sections of hedgerow to create the access and footpath links and a short stretch of crack willow trees. 60 metres of new native hedgerow will be included as compensation. The development has also been pulled back 2 metres from the hedgerow since the previous layout to retain dark wildlife corridors and prevent impacts on the tree belt. Biodiversity enhancements will be included, such as bird and bat boxes and bee bricks for every house and hedgehog-friendly fencing. A phosphates mitigation strategy, which involves upgrading eight septic tanks to package treatment plants, has been signed off by the ecologists and Natural England, as discussed in the report. So overall, subject to the ecology conditions and the 106, no further objections are raised in this regard. Committee report, so moving on to flood risk and drainage, the committee report has detailed how the flood risk assessment and drainage strategy has been updated since the previous resolution to reflect the current policy requirements. The LFA have also been reviewing sites in charge due to recent flood events in the area. This site itself is categorised as being in flood zone 1 at the lowest risk of flooding, with any runoff currently flowing off the site down to the east. The drainage strategy is shown here, which will convey surface water, any surface water runoff to a lined subs basin, shown here in blue, at the lowest point of the site. That will then hold back water and discharge it into an underground infiltration feature. Additional precautionary measures will also be included, such as a raised band along the eastern boundary and potentially also along the northeastern boundary to retain any exceedance waters on site. Barrel drainage will be drained into the existing Wessex Water public sewer network, and the full detailed design of all the drainage infrastructure will be required to be submitted and reviewed by the LFA prior to commencement. Subject to conditions of 106, the LFA Section 106 obligations. The package of financial contributions have been updated as listed here, notably including 1.28 million towards local small places, as well as monies to the NHS for GP surgery expansion, and financial contributions towards improving off-site play, sports and youth facilities. The applicant will be required to sign a legal agreement with Tilia Homes to secure the delivery of the footpath link into Snowley Grange. Off-site improvements to pedestrian crossing points on the desire lines into town have also been secured. So in conclusion, in terms of the planning balance, the principle remains in accordance with the local plan. This application has been previously approved by the council and further improvements have been made to it since. Significant benefits include the delivery of 94 new houses on an allocated housing site that can be immediately delivered. Internal footpath connections will also provide important safe future links as these new development sites come forward. The shortfall in affordable housing weighs against the proposal. However, 19% will be delivered, and overall the benefits have been considered to outweigh the adverse effects. The recommendation remains to approve the application again, subject to the completion of the legal agreements and conditions as set out within the report. Thank you.
Thank you. We move on to public speakers. I invite Councillor Craig Hussey from Charlton Council to speak. If you make sure the microphone at the end, you might have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I would like to thank and commend the planning officer, Jane Fuller, for taking the trouble to talk to residents, our officers and the applicant. This has resulted in a much more acceptable application for many local people. Things such as the stopping up of access to Holbear, along with Block 55 garden being extended to enclose the area adjacent to it, along with the planting scheme. The proposed new pedestrian link to the existing play equipment at the Tilia site at the A358 end of the site, and the safeguarding of the significant and well-established tree screen and windbreak along the northern boundary are all welcome. So thank you. I'm well aware that whatever else is said, it will fall foul of the tilted balance, as your officers have admitted to taking the professional opinions of those experts supporting the application at face value, for example, highways, despite compelling and robust arguments and facts which take apart these views and professional reports put forward by the professional opinions of those who act against the proposals. 2 examples. The first is the Convent Junction at the A358 and A30. It's been stated by officers for years that this junction is over capacity without the committed development. Professional opinions against inappropriate development have confirmed time after time that the predicted queues put forward by applicants are not valid. My second point is the Chard Town Council and Chard Area Resilience Group put forward evidence that building out recent approval is exacerbating the storm water flooding in the Chard area. This is now to the extent that even the house builders are asking them for help. Clearly, the flood reports from applicant professionals are either too limited, they do not understand the problems, or inappropriate for considering consent on a growing number of sites. Locally, we are not against the development, but it needs to be in the correct place with appropriate safeguards and mitigation built in. Our residents cannot continue to be subject to flooding, and the authorities and agency to understand the arguments and evidence put forward by Chard Town Council and Chard Area Resilience Group. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Next, can I please call the agent, Catherine Lee?
Thank you, Jan. As members will have heard, the previous resolution granted material consideration in the determination of this planning application. The policy context has not materially changed since 2020, as the site is allocated for residential development and presumption in favour of sustainable development is engaged. The site is a logical location for development, being within the Chard Eastern development area, to the south of the Snowdon Grange development, and to the north of the allocated site, which is currently subject to the planning application for housing. The proposed development will provide a significant contribution towards meeting the identified housing requirements and will assist the council's 5-year housing land supply. It will provide 18 on-site affordable houses, which will assist in meeting the affordable housing requirement. Significant financial contributions will be made towards education, the NHS and sports and leisure facilities. On-site highways works and phosphates mitigation will also be provided. The density of 31 dwellings per hectare is in accordance with the Chard Regeneration Plan and makes efficient and effective use of land as required by local and national planning policy. As set out in the officer's report, there have been a number of improvements made to the scheme since the previous resolution to grant. Amendments to building regulation requirements since 2020 also mean that the development will be subject to additional sustainability requirements. Summerfield are a local housing developer with a proven track record of delivering quality housing within Somerset. They are committed to the delivery of the development as soon as possible. There are no outstanding objections from any statutory constituencies, including the Highways Authority, and we therefore request for support for clearance of the recommendation of the planning permission to be granted. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to move on to questions from members and points of clarification on the technical data or any of the points raised. Are there any members of the council aware?
Thank you. It's on the affordable home reduction. I understand it's been to the district valuer, as what I think was said. I'm somewhat surprised that a site which is having no sill on it is also being allowed to reduce the number of affordable homes. It seems somewhat unusual. And does it mean that the amount of the other contributions made in the 106 who are listed up there are larger than normal? Because it just seems not quite, I can't understand why it would be reduced if they're not paying sill.
Yes, so just to answer that, there was a viability assessment process that's gone through at the time of the original application. So that was sort of undertaken by sort of independent specialists and looked through that viability assessment. And yeah, so they concluded that given the other obligations, this one could only deliver 19% affordable. And we have sort of recently consulted again with the district valuer, who's confirmed that even though property prices have gone up in this time, over the period, build costs have also increased, so that the viability position would stay the same. I mean, I wasn't personally involved at that time, But I guess it's to do with the particulars of that particular land deal, this particular site.
Right. I have to say, Chairman, have you got any knowledge of the site next door? I know, the Tilia site, because I think they produced on exactly the same land, a scheme with full affordable homes. But anyway, I don't suppose you can answer that one. I'll bring it up later, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dawn.
Thank you. It was just to basically point out to members that the application came before committee in 2020,
Yeah.
resolution to grant. What happened then was the phosphate impacts. So all of that additional cost to the scheme in terms of the delay and the mitigation is something that wouldn't have been factored for at the point that they were negotiating the land deal for the site. So the lack of affordable housing, unfortunately, is a result of the additional costs of the nutrient neutrality mitigation that's been brought in. As you know, within South in particular, there's quite a lot of quite large applications that were stalled as a result of phosphates, but now have mitigation in place. But there has been a cost for the developer in securing that against each of the schemes.
So,
Thank you, Councillor Skelton.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if I could ask, so we passed this in the past, and can you tell me that it says it's still live, so if they had sorted out their phosphates, they could actually build the original site, should they want to put a shovel in the ground, so to speak, that could be built out if we hadn't had phosphates. And I really think we've got improvements. And another question was that China suffered a lot of flooding in the last 5 years, and a lot of that water does come down through that area. So has any thought been put in for changing that flood prevention due to the amount of water that we are now experiencing? And is there any way we can ask them to do that?
With the first point, it was actually approved, so it received a resolution to grant subject to 106. So the section 106 never got completed at that point because that's when the phosphates issue hit. So they didn't receive their decision, kind of stalled at that point along with the letter of the others. And the second point, through the flooding, obviously that's a hot topic, obviously in the Chard area, as we know. The LFA had really looked at it in quite a lot of detail over the last 6 months, and actually over the last month. They have actually added some extra kind of exceedance measures around the edge of where the detention basin is, and potentially along the northeastern boundary as well. But in theory, I mean, obviously at present, there's nothing to hold water onto that site. It's a sloping site, so I guess water runs off it onto the site below. So potentially this will put an attenuation feature at the lowest point to hold water onto the site. So yeah, they have scrutinised it in light of recent flood events in the area.
Thank you. Just to add on the back of that, in terms of the criteria that the LFA would have been assessing this application against in 2020 has obviously been updated since. So the mitigation measures that are being proposed by this site are up to date with the current government in terms of the attenuation measures plus climate change in terms of flood attenuation measures. And the LFA, as Jane said, have reviewed the scheme in detail over the last year and put in extra measures. So it's everything it was in 2020 plus in terms of climate change and flood risk management.
Thanks, Osborne.
Thank you, Chairman. I can understand why residents are extremely nervous in Chard over the flooding, because we all know that there was a theoretical flood mitigation scheme for the Snowdon Heights development, and it has an attenuation pond that remains bone dry no matter how cataclysmic the conditions. So I can understand why people are concerned and how these two sites will work together to ensure that flooding is not made worse. My question though relates to the social housing element. And the concern that's been expressed that social housing is basically being bundled in to one part to along one boundary of the site, when ideally we usually like social housing to be plotted around the development. It commented in the report, I think it was page 43, that because we approved it in 2020, that's how it's meant to be. But is this coming forward as what looks like a revised, updated application? Can this committee ask for that to be amended if we were so minded to do so?
Okay.
Yeah, so the comments on the affordable housing and how they were laid out in the site were made under the original assessment. Those comments have been put back to the applicant, but you know, clearly it's their decision if they want to amend the layout in that regard. I mean, there are sort of different views about whether this is actually on the periphery of the site, because obviously, you know, they will be having sort of long range views from that spot. They're quite close to open space, so I don't think they're necessarily in a sort of highly adverse position. And they're in a long line, but they are actually in two separate groups. So we did have discussions about it. I didn't feel that it was so adverse that we would refuse the layout if that on those grounds. Was that okay?
Thank you. Any further questions or points of clarification? If not, Jane or Dawn, whoever's best, can I ask, Chart Town Council mentioned that several documents and bits of professional advice have been offered, but been ignored by this council. Could you just add some clarification to that point, please?
I'm actually not aware specifically of what those documents were in terms of flood risk. You mentioned there was a report about new developments creating more flood risk. Can't recall exactly what that document was, unless that's something was sent to the LFA.
I think there were some discussions in the speakers talk about the highways and highways authority information that came in as part of their application. As part of reviewing and writing up the officer's decision, all of the background papers that have been submitted in support or in objection to the case have been gone through, assessed and considered as part of drafting the report. And similarly, when we get highway information, that's usually forwarded on to the highway departments. And we do actually have John Fillingham with us, so I'm going to pass over to him for any extra highway comments. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't bring my mic. Yes, good afternoon, everyone. John Fellingham from Highways. Obviously, for this scheme, as it's been mentioned by the Town Council and been put through by Jane's detailed report, is the Highway Authority reviewed the application. And obviously through this and the updated information we had, the applicant updated the transport assessment with going through not only the original 2023 scenarios, but also that they looked at the 2028 scenarios. So they carried out a very robust review of the model as we would do through each process. That included a number of reviews of the surrounding junctions through pre-application discussion, or pre-applications before they submitted it. A number of discussions in terms of the junctions that we wanted them to assess and look at the uplift on. They've gone through that robustly, having read through the transport assessment, and they've provided different information in relation to the actual impacts of what they're going to be. In terms of the Confident Junction that was mentioned by a gentleman from Town Council, they've gone through and they've shown that this application will obviously have an impact, and that impact will also mean that it will see a reduction in the capacity of there. The numbers were considered to be acceptable on balance, you know, nothing that we would consider to be severe, because as we members are well aware of the applications that you've considered over time, that we have to make sure any impact is considered severe and defendable by appeal. All the information that has come back through the process and through the transport assessment that was assessed was found to be, yes, there will be an increase. However, that increase is not significant enough for us to warrant an objection on the grounds of it being severe under the NPPF. Just to touch on the other points as well, through the process that we've worked with Jane on in terms of the other elements, we've worked to improve ped cycle connectivity through the site to offer alternatives as well to the private car. So from our point of view, this revised scheme that's in front of you today, members, is actually an improvement in terms of highways and what we can actually achieve in this area.
Thank you. Just one more point of clarification from myself. I vaguely remember as chair of the previous planning committee in Henry West and the South Somerset some 5 years ago, the Highways Department said that the Convent Link junction was already at capacity and a certain percentage over. I can't remember the percentage we were quoted. And I would say since then we've had around 500 to 600 new homes built in the town. At what point, and I'm not expecting you to know exactly, will it become over capacity to the point that it is an issue?
Yeah, obviously, I can't comment on wide big areas in terms of where that level is and where that line. Be aware that junction is one of the main junctions we have on the top 10 list in terms of looking at capacity in areas and how we can look to improve things. I'm not saying here, we want to be correct to say, yes, that's the high risk, but we are aware of the issues in relation to that. And obviously, we'll look at each application as it comes through. And if we get to a point, as you say, where we find that that line is there, then obviously we will write and discuss that with both the developer and our planning colleagues as well to say, this is where we're at the threshold, and then look at alternatives of what can be done to help improve that situation.
Thank you. Councillor Webb.
Yeah, highways once, just come to me. It was mentioned during the presentation that this 30 mile an hour would be moved. I think the sign is more or less, the 40 mile an hour is more or less where the junction is going to be, I think, from memory. How far east towards Tatworth is the 30 mile limit going to be set? Because it's quite important that it's quite a good distance before you get to this new junction. That makes sense, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. Yeah, did we have a plan of showing it plot there? Yeah. It's, yeah, normally what we have, Councillor Webb, is that we have the applicant will set on their scheme of where the new speed limit will be set, and that'll be based on the visibility that they can then achieve at 30 mile an hour, from access a little bit more. As other applications that we deal with, but forgive me, I've not been able to go through the full details, but there will be a plan showing exactly where that line is going to be moved to, where they'll be able to incorporate the appropriate safe visibility displays at that point of access to be done. So it will be all done through my colleagues in traffic management to make sure it's in the most appropriate place.
Yeah. Far enough is my point. Because if it's near the junction, it's got to be further back towards Tatworth. But anyway, that's it.
Rest assured, it will be
far enough. Thank you.
Yeah, any further, Councillor Offal?
Yeah, so I think again it's relating to traffic, but when you do these applications, I think we sort of, when it concerned Convent Junction, I seem to remember vaguely we actually asked at the time for a sort of study of the cumulative impact of all these developments coming forward, because each in isolation might not necessarily be a problem, but you put them all together and you may wind up with a problem. So what account is taken of the cumulative impact of all the developments that have not just come forward and now built out, but are also going to be built out in the future? How much account do we take of that?
Thank you, Councillor Offal. I do believe, I don't know if get back to, so I do believe the piece of work was done by Three Dragons, and it looked at the junction and also the potential of the related road. I don't know if anyone has the answer or knows where that would what into that.
Yeah, I remember that coming from this committee.
I'm guessing we don't have it would be useful, I think, maybe to have a look at that. Okay, any further questions or points of clarification? If not, we'll move into the debate. Okay, Councillor Seaman.
Well, I have to say, I thought the officer's presentation covered all my worries, which is unusual, specifically the flooding, and the lower affordable housing. So I was pleased to hear that the basin is actually going to be a sealed basin and underground control with a release rather than what we sometimes think, which is merely a way of redirecting stuff through a narrow hole. I'm quite happy. I think this is logical allocated site and I can't see any reason to refuse it. So I'm happy to move the recommendation.
I'll just go around and just look around, which is comfortable and go there, but Councillor Mayor and Councillor Curley.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, as you and I and one of the discussed this before, I'm really interested in this today because it's to note, as the representative of town council said, that the representation has actually been taken notice of. And I think that I'm really encouraged by that. Things like just stopping off the track, which was a big problem with this, and also making a garden and moving the houses back a bit. It's all very encouraging. The fact that it's on the local plan and has been for how many years, I'm not quite sure, but certainly before 2001. So there can't be any problem with the fact that building out beside other houses, because they must have known this was coming. It would have been within the plans or the solicitors' inquiries. So, and also the footpaths have been changed, which I think is very good. And quite frankly, it has been improved once by what was Area West Committee. It has been improved on since then. And I have to say that apart from I'm a bit concerned about the affordable home side of it, but that has been explained. I would think that we have to go ahead and approve this application.
Thank you, Councillor Curley.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Ware has stolen my thunder there. I think I was going to say exactly the same thing. I just want to come back and the final point that he said, I too share a level of disappointment with 19% of social housing. I do understand perhaps why that has come about. And I think that perhaps that actually that has
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to make comment at this point? I think, I'm going to echo comments that have been made. I am really disappointed with the 19% affordable homes. The whole idea of the Eastern Development Area being still exempt was to make all of these sites affordable and not only to provide much needed housing, but also more importantly to provide social housing, which we are desperately in need of in our area. So I think 19% is a poor number. Whilst I understand the affordability side of it, this was why the three exemptions were in. I see that there are other sites coming in. What I don't want is for this to become a benchmark for the remaining sites. And for, let's do a set example and allow developers to skim off of that affordable housing. I am, as Councillor Wilkes said, really pleased. It does appear that we've really listened to local residents on this one. We've taken into account many of the comments that have been made and seem to have accommodated pretty much all of them, which I think is really positive and something we should be really proud of. Flooding does concern me, as being someone who's been out in those floods in the town. I know they've happened in many other places as well. I do think, we talk about 1 in 100 events and different things. They now seem to be 1 in 1 events. It seems to happen at least once a year, if not twice. And I think we need to look much harder at some of the attenuation funds, some of the ways we capture runoff from sites. But it would appear that not only has that happened, it's been exceeded on this site, which I'm pleased with. As been said, we have approved this application in the past at Area West some years ago. Several improvements have been made, and I think we would probably find it very hard to not approve this application. If no one else wishes to make any further comment, Council has made a recommendation to approve following the officer's recommendations on the report. Just have to see the second, Councillor Curley. Okay, with it being duly proposed and seconded, collect show of hands for all those in favour of approval. Okay, that is unanimous. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, for that. Okay, we move on to agenda item 6, which is Lamprey Lane, South Heatherton, application number 204/0141444. And I will just give the officers a second to swap over. Fiona will then provide us with the information on this application.
They shall be the actually not we want to now see. Yes. Yeah, that was what we said was going to stand. What the films to be.
This is the thumbnail slide.
Yeah.
This is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Having percentage of the actually.
Yes, I know.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. Nothing's wrong. Yeah. Exactly.
So again, making suggestions for to make it. So.
And then they comes to never come. We never eat these ones.
Yeah.
Because it's called, that famous. Relief from. So it's going to.
It's not going to do.
So it's talking to him. Hopefully he's going to feel bad. So that's should be doing. Yeah.
Okay. Are we all ready then? Okay. And go ahead with the end of the presentation.
Okay, good afternoon, Chair and members. The application for me is for residential development at Lamprey Lane, South Heatherton. Planning permission is sought for the erection of 18 dwellings with associated vehicular access, garaging, sustainable drainage and landscaping. The application site comprises of a parcel of land previously used for agriculture, totaling an area of 1.96 hectares. The area to the northeast is to be developed and the site to remain as public community space. The site is located on the southwestern outskirts of South Heatherton and the site slopes gently downwards to the southeast. There are two public rights of way through the site. One runs along the back of the houses on Lampreys Lane, and the second runs along the top of the southern section of the site. Access is from Lampreys Lane. So here's the site layout with residential property to the northwest. The proposed housing mix is 10 4-bedroom dwellings, 2 3-bedroom dwellings, and 4 1-bedroom flats. Affordable housing provision units 10 and 11 are 3-bedroom houses, and units 12, 13, 14, and 15 are 1-bedroom flats, each with private individual amenity space. The recommendation is to approve subject to the completion of a legal agreement to secure construction of highway works, affordable housing and phosphorus mitigation, and financial contributions for play provision and education. Full details of financial sums and a full set of conditions are set out in the committee report. The developer has agreed to accept these pre-commencement conditions. And some of these matters are not yet concluded and will require discharge of conditional planning applications should approval be granted. So the key considerations are principle of development, planning history, and you can see the rest, I'll not go through them. The principle of development is already established as an outline planning application at the site was approved in 2018, thus establishing the principle of residential development as acceptable. So the application that's already approved, outline application, commitment was given to 15 dwellings. Conditions and section 1 and 6 of the outline require that a detailed layout plan and detailed landscaping plan and other plans are submitted at reserved matters stage. The reserved matters application has been submitted, but it is not yet decided. Ongoing phosphate issues have delayed the process, and we are yet to receive a landscape plan for the land to the site of the site, so we can't yet make a recommendation. So back to the food application for us. The pattern and form of the proposed development would blend with the existing form to the northwest, and the proposed amenity area to the south allows the development to sit comfortably, respecting the rural setting. Parish Council objected to proposed materials of render and red brick, and the developer came back with a mixed palette. The Parish Council continued to object, so the developer has asked for materials to be agreed by way of condition. There is also a condition for a detailed landscaping scheme to be agreed prior to the commencement of development. And that would include details regarding maintenance and management of this green space. Okay, so impact on neighbours' community. I'd like to correct an error in the committee report, and that is that the separation distance between unit 1 and number 82 is not 30 metres, it's actually 14.5 metres. Sorry, but there was an issue with the scale on the site plan. Thanks to Mr. Mackey of number 82 for bringing this to my attention, and apologise for any stress caused. As guidance, we normally accept a separation distance of 18 to 21 metres between dwellings in a back-to-back arrangement where there are windows in one rear elevation directly facing windows of the opposite dwelling. In this case, 14.5 metres could be acceptable between Unit 1 and 82, as there are no windows in the gable elevation of the proposed Unit 1, hence no overlooking, and there's a tree in the garden that would help soften the views from the upstairs window at number 82. Furthermore, a condition would be included to ensure permitted development rights are removed at number 82. So that is the flank elevation that number 82 would be facing. The impact on residential amenity. Residential amenity is good, with each unit meeting national space standards. Each dwelling has private amenity space, including the affordable housing units, and each has dedicated parking space or spaces. The proposed development would include upgrading of an existing access. The upgrade has previously been approved by the Highway Authority as part of the outline planning application. The Highway Authority is content that the dwelling is acceptable in terms of access, movement and parking level, and that the development won't compromise highway safety. So, surface water drainage strategy indicates that runoff will be directed to an attenuation pond in the southern section and will be stored here until it is safe to discharge to the North Mill Brook, which runs along the bottom of the site. Along here. A condition is included for a fully detailed scheme to be agreed prior to the commencement of development. And at this time, pond dimensions and capacity and the discharge rate can be agreed. In terms of phosphates, the development will not harm the integrity of the Somerset levels and moors, as on-site package treatment plant will mitigate for harmful phosphates, and nutrient neutrality is achieved prior to discharging to a pumping station to the rear of 29 and 31 Lamprey Lane. So to finish off, the recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to completion of legal agreement and compliance with agreed conditions. Thank you, Chair and members.
Thank you very much. So we'll move on to public questions, and I will start with Sharon Blake, who is our first speaker. I'd like to come along to the use the mic at the end there, and then you will have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'd like to object to the current planning application for 18 properties in Ambrose Lane. The outline planning application was for 15 properties, and I have no objection to this at all. It respected the need to include open space, trees, buffer and improvements to the existing footpaths. This application is an increase of 20%, taking the total up to 18 properties and ignoring the open spaces, trees, buffer, etc. This will be to the detriment of the appearance of the new development. This 20% increase to 18 properties is to achieve by changing the orientation of some of the houses to the detriment of those living in Ampers Lane along the current footpath boundary. And here the planning officer has explained that this has changed. But by turning the properties to accommodate an overall additional 3 properties, means the side of the property on the right of the entrance to the new development is now just the width of the footpath away from the existing property, a matter of just a few metres. I believe the planning officer has previously stated that 21 metres is considered an acceptable distance, in which case I don't think that's acceptable. This has come about because of the change of orientation to fit 2 properties into what was the space for 1 in outline planning permission. Further consideration is that services in South Petherton are already stretched. South Petherton has 2 schools, which I understand are at maximum capacity. It is unclear where the infant school could be expanded, even if funding, as in the report, is provided. There is a struggling doctor's surgery through lack of doctors, albeit currently been physically expanded. There is traffic congestion and lack of parking in the village centre. All would suggest the makings of a dormitory village, as more people are moving into new houses and are not going to be able to use these overstretched services. The 3 additional properties proposed in this planning aid application are not in keeping and will have a detrimental effect on the area. To recap, I said the main reason I object to the planning application is the change from 15 to 18 properties and the association problems that brings.
Thank you. Next, can I please call Peter Kidner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do I need to turn this on? Thank you, okay. Do I possibly have the site plan up?
Apologies.
That's fine. That's great. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I have no extra grind in this other than I regularly walk the 2 footpaths on there. And I'm pleased to note that the planners have taken note of my earlier comments onto the outline planning, and the reduced width of the footpath has been overruled again, which is great. Thank you very much for that. This situation here is that to the north is more villas, some of the largest council houses and largest council house gardens that you've ever seen. And this development should be visually coherent and of similar quality. And generally it does this, and certainly the Outline Planning Commission did that. However, the exception to this are units 1 and 2. And if you just look at that picture, you can see that that first line of houses has all been skewed in to squeeze in a couple of houses at units 1 and 2. I have no objection to them increasing it from 15 to 17, but that extra house there, right behind number 82, completely spoils the coherency of the plot. I'm pleased to say the planning officer has amended the distances, because that obviously stood out that it was nowhere near 30 metres as claimed in the report. The officer states that there's no significant loss of amenity with this number unit 1, but it is, as I think 13.5 metres she just said, and that is a gable end to the southwest where a lot of the light will come, particularly in the afternoon and evening, and I think that is going to have a huge impact on the amenity of number 82 and to a lesser extent number 80. There were 34 objections in the original planning application. The report says 17, which I think is incorrect. Also, the 34 did not include my letter, amongst others, where I also objected in writing. So the figures of the objections are way out. And as I say, it's more than 34. Finally, school numbers. I remember Persimmon Phase 2, some 10 years ago, the county council quoted 7 extra school children. There were 43 in that development. Here again, the numbers, I suspect, are far, far too low for an already very overcrowded infants and junior school. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next call, Councillor Joe Andrew Green.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Committee. I'm sorry, I was also going to talk to you about Unit 1. Chris Hockey is the resident number 82, Ramsey saying, fortunately can't be here today. We've heard from the planning officer that the separation distance is only 14.5 metres. And this really is not good enough, and it's not that it's overlooking, it's that it's overbearing. The house right in front of the house. You can see, just looking at that plan, how much space there is on that site. There is absolutely no need for anybody who has an existing property to be overlooked. And I would like to ask the planning officer if we could put forward an amendment that Unit 1 should either be a bungalow or taken out and put somewhere else. There is a lot of space and a lot of garden space for each of the houses, and I feel this one just being shooed in the corner there. And it goes against EQT, and people are supposed to have amenity. And I don't know whether that's possible to do, but I ask that you consider that, please, when you're thinking. I know there's been a lot of thought put into the flooding, terrible flooding in South Kensington on the 26th of January, and a lot of consideration was gone into that. And I hope that now the proposals put forward will be sufficient, but also is a condition that we will make sure they are adhered to, because it is so important. Building houses that flood other people is really not what we want to do, and I really want to build houses. So, Richard Chairman, that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I move on to points of clarification and questions from my apologies. Six one together. Donna Collier, who is the page.
Good afternoon, my name is Donna Collier and I'm the planning director for the applicant Acorn Homes. Firstly, I'd like to emphasise that the proposals are both technically sound and policy compliant. They include an approved on-site phosphate solution, affordable housing provisions, and comes with a recommendation for you for approval. Previous areas of concern have been addressed in the determination process and where required are reasonably managed by condition of section 26. For clarity, this includes the parish council's previous concerns regarding materials, which we've been willing to address appropriately and which is commonly managed by a condition. I'd like to take this time therefore to address a few matters of relevance. The principle of residential development in this case has been established on the basis of the lack of 5-year housing demand supply, thus triggering the presumption in favour of sustainable development. The previous consented 2008 outline permission for the site as a potential housing allocation within the South Sunset Local Plan Review. In the case of the outline permission, this has established that at least 15 dwellings will be accommodated on the site. I have noted that the concepts used to illustrate this quantity within that application were at the time very high level, and the layout shown is not especially efficient use of the site, which is a concept strongly promoted within the NPPF, nor does it indicate the type of properties represented. The application before you includes 4 flats and 2 smaller semi-detached houses, which in itself would easily account for the increase in the numbers without significantly increasing the footprint of the buildings. Furthermore, whilst we appreciate that change is hard for existing neighbours to the site, it has been established that this is a suitable location for housing, and the planning officer agrees that the design of the scheme easily assimilates with the existing properties on Lamprey's Lane. Moreover, the orientation and design of new dwellings has sought to prevent unacceptable overlooking or meets the issues arising from the proposals. In the case of Plot 1, care has been taken to ensure that there are no windows to the north elevation, and 15 metres from the side of the new dwelling to the rear of number 82, I understand, is an acceptable separation distance for this type of arrangement.
In that intervening space, there is a stone wall, a footpath, a 2-metre fence, a tree, an outbuilding and a garden, thus illustrating the sizable difference and little opportunity for negative impacts between the two properties. A quote from the committee report, the development will provide a good environment for new residents and will not cause demonstrable harm to existing residents. We therefore urge the committee to vote in favour of the proposals. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to ask Tom to come in, just to clarify and answer a couple of the points that have been raised.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on some of your comments have been made, and also some councillors would have seen an email from a resident that wasn't able to attend committees. Just wanted to pick up on a couple of the points that have been made. Quite evidently, the majority of representations do refer to plot 1, its close proximity. It's houses are at this sort of distance where you've got a gable end and no windows and facing an existing property. But I think the report recognises that it is a close proximity. And just to clarify, I think you updated on this point, the PD rights would, if that plot 1's allowed as it is, PD rights could be removed to avoid any sort of outbuildings being closer. And we could have a condition that would not allow first floor windows. I think you've already said that, so just to clarify that. One of the speakers referred to it being a bungalow. I can't comment on that at the moment. The other thing about section 106, I mean, all the requests have been covered, and that's in the report. Yes, the things I was talking about impact on infrastructure. So the section 106 agreement would cover everything that's been asked for.
Okay, questions, please, Councillor Stanton.
I think everybody's aware, but I'll mention it anyway, that I live in South Petherton. I'm the chair of the Sunset Rivers Authority, which deals with flooding. And I actually was instrumental in setting up the flood group after the 26th of January flooding, when 30 properties were flooded in village. That's now an independent group, but I just want to mention that. Three questions, or 3.5, if I may. Firstly, as I read the applications, the original outline one and this one, the original outline approval for 15, that was applied for by the landowner, but this application for 18 is applied for by a development company. I think that's right. If we refuse this application, does that previous outline application from 8 years ago come into effect, or does there have to be a new application? Second question is it possible to put on a condition that plot 1 should be switched to a bungalow? And thirdly, has the flood risk to this particular set of properties is clearly properly dealt with, and properties that they're higher up the slope, they're not likely to flood. But are you satisfied from a planning point of view that the risk to the village below, because I understand the bottom edge of this development flows right into the village, where all the flooding happened on the 26th of January, and incidentally 4 times in the last 25 years. So it's about a 1 in 7 event that we're getting, not 1 in 100 as the EA described it. Are you satisfied that there's enough protection of the community downstream? I know that if you look at the LLFA 8th of March report, they mentioned that specifically, must demonstrate that flood risk will not be increased elsewhere due to the proposal. Those are my 3 questions, or 3.5. Thank you.
Tom, 2 minutes.
Thank you. I'm trying to remember, because I was looking at information I talked, so forgive me if I missed one of them. I think the application, we clarified the application is developer. This one, we love that question. I'll go back because I can remember you asked what the Lead Local Flood Authority provided a detailed consultation response on the 18th of February, saying they were satisfied that I think condition 21 could achieve what needs to be achieved could be done, and Amy Fletcher from the local flood authority has reviewed that yesterday and is satisfied that the conditions are appropriate and what needs to be achieved can be achieved. I'm not, so, I'm just looking up the outline application was 1702/709. I was trying to see the date it was issued, because I don't know whether it's out of date. I think you said,
I understand.
I understand that the reserved matters application was submitted within the correct timescale. So, the outline, once the reserved matters could be determined, and that is based on the outline application.
Not sure I understood. Does that mean if we refuse this one, we immediately revert to the previous outline application?
Well, of course, the applicant has the right to appeal. If that appeal was dismissed, then yes, we would revert to the outline and the reserved matters application that's before us.
Can I just checked with Julie, so there is a live application that is valid, which is the one that's already there, and this is a second application that we're looking to determine today. So if approved or not, the original application is still valid and live. So if whether this is approved or not, you could end up with two valid applications on the same site. That's correct. Yeah.
I think you asked for the bungalow. It's feasible we could have a condition and look at that, agreeing that as a change, but that's something that you debated.
I'd like to propose that when we get to questions, please.
I'm more than happy to come back to you, but I may also want to bring Dawn in before we get to that. Can I stick to questions for a moment? Anywhere, Patrick?
Yeah, just a quick question from me. Condition 20 details that every home will get electric vehicle charge point, except for the apartments. So there's 4 apartments, and there'll only be 2 charge points for those 4. I just wondered why that is. Why can't we have 4? So each apartment has a charge point, please.
Yes, in terms of EV charging, generally speaking, what we try and do is, as you say, every individual property has its own charge point, but then there's ratio for apartments where they have to have shared, because obviously they have shared kind of communal parking areas, so we can't provide it for every single one, but we can provide 2 spaces. It's on a ratio within the parking strategy, so we can provide it, so it's a couple of charge points for those spaces, but we can't provide it for in terms of that element.
Thank you, if I may, Chair. It just seems a bit unequal. From what I can see, it seems like there is enough parking in 1 space per apartment. It would make sense to my mind if we were able to deliver 1 EV charge point per apartment. I'm aware there is policy which we probably adhere to, which just seems to my mind to be a little interesting.
Thank you. I'm going to Councillor Osborne and then Councillor Seaman.
Thank you. I think the earlier questions I was going to raise have already been raised by Councillor Stanton, and I certainly support that amendment to a bungalow as opposed to other acceptable compromise. My question really relates to the neighbourhood plan, because in a way that's why this application is here. It runs 2015 to 2028. My understanding is neighbourhood plans have to be reviewed about every 5 years. So has that been done? And also in terms of how much weight is attached to a neighbourhood plan, because we are now below 3 years of the 5-year housing land supply, we're 2.11, does that in any way undermine the position of the neighbourhood plan?
Would you like to take that one then? Tom, here and then. Steve, can I ask you to really succinctly just bring your questions back just for Tom again, sir?
Yes, it was. The neighbourhood plan looks like it was made in 2015. They're supposed to be reviewed every 5 years. Has this one been done? And my second point was, at what point does the neighbourhood plan become out of date in relation to the 5-year housing land supply? Bearing in mind ours is now sitting at 2.11. What impact will that have on, I guess, the material weight attached to it?
I think that's what's one, Labour Plan 2015, where we don't have a 5-year housing supply limited weight.
Thank you, councillor C.
Chair, I've got the impression that we may be off the rails a little bit, and I just want some guidance from officers. It's my understanding we can't redesign the planning application in the chamber. It's my understanding that in order for your amendment to be acceptable in principle, it would have to meet, the sorts of tests that we would refuse the application without it, otherwise we wouldn't be acting reasonably. I would like to know how far apart. I don't buy this. There must be a distance in front of something's garden. People in these houses might well enjoy a view at the moment. They have no right to it, and they have plenty of back garden space. They're got that gap there, the side of the building. And the question is, I want to know what the distance is between the buildings on the site, because I think it's less than that distance front to front, which is sensible and tested. I want to know what the distance is between buildings on the site. So I think what's being asked for is that person gets special treatment compared to the norms in Somerset.
Thank you. So I'm going to pass on the question regarding the bungalow bit for a second, because I'll come on to that. Do we have the answer to the question on the space in between?
Well, I can't see any situation where we do have the back-to-back arrangement and separation distance. What distance are you currently? Sorry.
If you look at the two properties at the gateway, they are front to front, they are window to window distances. It seems to me that distance is less than the distance from the gable end to windows of the main property as issue. And similarly, there are other front to front, side to side, which I believe have some fenestration in them within the estate. So I think we just got to be consistent. I mean, the gardens.
Shorter, but we have a road in between those properties, so cars and whatnot would interrupt overlooking the incidents.
Tom, can I bring you in on this myself?
Thank you, Chair. If you look around the existing developments and anywhere you see housing, they can be terraced right next to each other, so there's no hard and fast rule about how close the property can be. It's a matter of making a judgment about whether something's being overlooked. In this instance, if there's no first floor windows and there's a distance of 14.5 metres, and then where the windows are on the ground floor further away at the other end of the house. So that's an overlooking matter. And then there's whether something's overbearing. And again, this distance, if you look at the properties, existing properties next door, the properties here, they are closer. So indicates that it can be considered okay to be that close. The question then, I guess, that the NPPF and indeed the local land talks about what is good design. I mean, I guess you have a sliding scale, excellent design to terrible design, and okay, there's a degree of objectivity, that objectivity comes in, and it's about making a judgment of what we think is good design in terms of on the site and whether there's overbearing sort of size and massing of the property.
Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you. Back to the bungalow, Chair. This is a house site. Bungalow sites are a different size, normally much bigger ground space. One wonders whether, even if we did make a condition that would be a bungalow, it would be a fairly small one, I think. And the other thing is, if we did then deciding, well, we're not going to have something on plot number one, would we then reduce the affordable house equation? Because I think it's a third, isn't it, of 18, which is six. So take down to 17, you probably have to lose an affordable house as well. So I think there is a lot of complications with number one, which we really can't decide today. I don't think.
Okay, can I just ask us to park any comments on the bungalow or that plot for a moment and just do anything else, Patrick?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, committee, I'm slightly obsessed with this issue. I'm trying to imagine myself renting a flat, of which there are four, an apartment, I suppose. They are one-bedroom flats. There's 2 charge points. If you live in one of those flats and you go and charge your EV, how are you going to know, who's paying for it? Am I being stupid? Don't say yes, stupid. I'm just, I want to make sure we're building homes that fit for the future, is to charge their electric cars. I'm just really confused. If you live in apartment 12, you plug your car in, how does that get built to you? I think there needs to be 4 charge points, and perhaps this is one for discussion for the next bit of the meeting. If anyone else has, if anyone can help me overcome that one before we even debate it, it'd be great.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Power, and then I'm going to revisit the bungalow question.
Very Patrick, I don't appreciate it. Just with the condition we put it in, as there might have been a point of clarification, but could we put that in a condition that there is for EV parking charges? So I think that is a good idea.
Yes, I guess if someone wants to make a proposal on an application and try and touch up the condition, that's something that could be done. Before we move on any further, is it anything other than charging points or bungalows?
It was just clarification on charging points.
Go on then, go on.
Thank you. I just had a look at 11.16, and it says that the appearance of the flats for one-bedroom flats would appear as a semi-detached pair of dwellings. So does that mean that the 2 charging points are only 2 for aesthetic reasons, to make it look like it's just a standard semi? Thank you.
It's your eyes and looking at Dan's receiving quite stuck on these charging points. Let's hope these residents will have electric cars.
Yes, I think for the benefit, I think that's one of the members has sort of said that if members are minded that they want to have one charge point per thing, then that can be put in as part of it. The condition's already there. It's part of the recommendation for the officer, so it can be there rather than, as I say, coming back to the point. I mean, as I said, the charging strategy does set out the benefits. We also have to take into account not everyone does necessarily own an electric car or have access to that. We have to balance that out as part of the whole wider aspect of that. We have to make provision within it, but similarly, I see the point of what so I think through the conditional process, let's just say that as an amendment, there wouldn't be any issue necessarily with having a charge point extra there along both sides there.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm just going to go and try and clarify the plot of the. Please tell me we're not talking about charging points.
I was going to think about your misery with the charging points to bungalows, but I can let you steer a little bit. Condition 20, if anyone wants to have a look at it, it does require a charge point for every single property, but it does say 2 charge points for the apartment units. 12, 13, 14, 15. So effectively, you would have a charge point for every single vehicle and 2 charge points for the apartments. But if you want 4 charge points for the apartments, it's a minor tweak. You can add it on as part of the decision. However, changing a 2-storey dwelling to a bungalow is not something that can be done as a minor tweak in the committee consideration. So if that's something that members feel on its own would be enough that you would be recommending refusal on it, I would strongly suggest refer the application for us to take that discussion offline with the agent. But officer's opinion is that based on the distances we've got, based on the fact there's a condition restricting windows, we don't feel that's a sustainable reason for refusal, and particularly with the 5 landslide to balance and the background position of the outline planning permission for 15, officers are recommending approval, but it is members' choice.
So Dawn's complete short circuit that whole conversation there. My next point was going to be is pretty much to ask that question, which is great, we've got the answer. And with that in mind, Councillor Southern, because you already mind to make a proposal, are you still looking to make a proposal rather than refuse or would defer it, or are you happy for us to move into debate?
That's a difficult one because Councillor Brandon Green and I spoke to the developer, still here, I think, before the meeting, and the indication was that they would be minded to modify plot one in some way. So we could talk about it under the question is whether that's enough to go on or whether we should defer this to the next meeting time to modify the application. That probably would be the best thing to do.
So we can modify the application whilst we're sat here. If you're minded to only be looking to move that forward with that amendment, then we will be looking at deferral. And if so, is that what you wish?
Yeah, I think on balance, I'd better propose that we defer this for the to give the developer a chance to modify the application.
So with that in mind, before we haven't debated this yet, are members looking to second that proposal, or are you looking to go into debate? That's okay.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to, I have to say, I am sympathetic to the issues of proximity. To me, it isn't an issue overlooking but overbearing. I think if we can get a resolution to this, it's worth deferring for, so I'm happy to second. Thank you, Chair.
Just one further matter, it's a little bit unfortunate because it's just outside of this site location plan, but just off to the northeast. I don't know how many judges are familiar with the area, but actually the scale of density and the relationship of those properties relative to the neighbouring properties around it is very similar, if not a lot tighter than this relationship. So the deferral could buy some time for the applicant to make some changes, but ultimately, as a committee, we need to make a decision. So I would only be suggesting you defer if you consider that the impact of a two-storey property in that position with no windows controlled by condition is bad enough that on that scheme you would be refusing it. If we are slightly uncomfortable but generally accepting the scheme, we should be determining applications as they are committed for members, because it was taking a lot of time deferring applications, bringing them back. The point was raised, I think it was Councillor Page, in terms of bungalows and footprints. And actually, you know, could you get a bungalow in that location and still get decent accommodation? That's uncertain. I would take a deferral over a refusal, but I do want members to think about whether it is actually so bad you would be wanting to refuse it on that impact, or whether you can determine the application for you.
Councillor Stanton, it's your proposal at the moment. I really don't like deferrals, but I also expect them a refusal. So what will I on for this?
Yeah, I really don't like deferrals either, but I like even less refusal of an application. And actually, I support. I mean, I think this development needs to happen. It's just a question of it happening in a way that's right for the community. I don't agree incidentally with Dawn's analysis of the density. The density of the existing Lampreys Lane development is a good bit less than this proposed new development. You can see that on the plan. It's very obvious if you walk through it. Much as I'm happy with deferrals, I think in this case, that's the way to do it. So I'll stick with that proposal if I may.
Okay, I'm going to call for second. If it sees seconder and that is agreed, then sorry, Councillor Curry, second. We'll hold it back in. I can listen to one person at a time. So does anyone wish to make a comment before we get to the seat?
I'm quite clear in my mind that this is wholly disproportionate and not to defer and leave the development with the uncertainty allows a fortnight for them to go to appeal. And I could almost hear an expected answer of this. We have towns and other than this one, other locations elsewhere in Somerset where this objection would just be laughed at because they're just very, very dense. This is not a small distance. I appreciate it's a change, but we have put multi-storey car parks next to buildings against the interests, private interests of the individual in the building because of the public gain. In this particular case, the public gain has got a number of houses, including quite a number of affordable housing units. And you're suggesting that we would, as a committee, refuse this because the design isn't great. Yeah, if you had had conversations with the applicant beforehand and he's not had them with the planners, that's unfortunate. But as a committee, I don't think we should even contemplate deferral on this. Whether it's reasonable grounds for deferral. Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Seegers. Does anyone else wish to comment at this point? If not, we have a valid proposal and a second on the table. Okay, can I please have a show of hands for all of those in favour of deferral? Six. Six. Seven. Those against deferral? 4, 5. And then the abstentions. Okay, so the application is deferred. Okay, thank you. So we move on to agenda item 7. Which is 24/02986 LBC, which is the internal and external alterations to ground floor, including security cameras, screen and thermal partition of ground floor, 31 Princess Street, Yeovil. And Charlotte is taking this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. The application is for listed building consent for the installation of security cameras to the front elevation of 31 Princess Street, Yeovil, together with internal alterations in the form of the installation of a security screen and works to existing internal partitions. It is brought before the committee as the applicant is a member of the authority and the Member of Parliament for Yeovil. The application building is a Grade 2 listed building located on the western side of Princess Street and within the Yeovil Town Centre Conservation Area, situated towards the northern end of the conservation area. The property forms a continuous frontage with neighbouring properties, many of which are also designated heritage assets. And you can see on this image, 31 Princess Street is marked with a red dot and can be seen here in context of the surrounding listed buildings. It is recommended that the current application for listed building consent be granted subject to conditions. Full details of the conditions are in the report. In terms of key considerations, the current application is for listed building consent only. As such, the only consideration in this case is on the historic fabric, character and setting of the listed building. "31 Princess Street was originally constructed as a townhouse. The ground floor is currently a commercial premises with a relatively modern shop front, the permission for which was granted in 1991,
As such, the current shop front was installed within the last 35 years and postdates the listing of the building, which was in October 1983. The upper floors of the building have been converted into flats following the grant of planning permission in 2017. As I have said, the property was listed in 1983. It is noted within the listing that it was listed for its group value as part of a grouping of buildings comprising of numbers 23 to 47 Princes Street, which have also been Grade 2 listed, albeit at a variety of dates. The proposal will involve the installation of 2 small security cameras on relatively modern shop frontage. You can see them here at either side. There and there. It has been noted in the application that as the building is to be used as the constituency office for the Oval MP, these cameras are necessary to ensure the security of members of staff working in the office and members of the public accessing services provided, particularly in the wake of other incidents at constituency offices in other parts of the country. The proposed cameras will be small, relatively unobtrusive, and can be removed if no longer required, and the works completely reversed. In addition, permission is sought to improve and extend existing internal barriers to provide service users with some privacy and to install a security screen towards the rear of the ground floor. Once again, the proposed works will be fully reversible with no harm to the historic fabric of the listed building. It is considered that both the internal and external works are small and represent a low level of less than substantial harm to the fabric, character and setting of the listed building, particularly given that they will be completely reversible if the use of the building ceases. It is recommended that a condition be attached to any consent requiring that the proposed works be reversed and the building restored to its current condition if the use as the constituency office ceases. In conclusion, public benefits to be secured by the works proposed in this current application outweigh the low level of less than substantial harm to the listed building, and officers consider that the application for listed building consent should be granted as it is in accordance with Section 16 of the Planning, Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act 1990, with the aims and objectives of policies EQ2 and EQ3 of the South Somerset Local Plan and relevant guidance within the NPPF. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you. There are no public speakers for, against, and no agent applicant wishes to speak. Are there any questions or points of clarification that any members have? If not, I will move as. Let's proceed.
We have everything reversible. It's effectively a temporary change and there's a time limit on it. Why does this require a consent? Can we just be clear exactly why this isn't a case of it's outside the consent regime?
Because it is still a listed building and there will still be less than substantial harm to the building.
Thank you. Councillor Kendall.
Thank you, Chair. Very good funny point. How does 2 external cameras protect internal people working?
I presume because you can see people who are coming and going through the front maybe or entering or exiting.
That's not how it was explained, but it doesn't say it's a plain question, that's all. Council, I assume it's a record. If someone comes in and does something they shouldn't, then they're on camera. So it's a deterrent, I assume.
Yeah.
And the word you used was protect the 2 internal workers, but it doesn't matter. It's okay, as I said, that's any question. That then becomes a protection.
Okay. Okay, if there are no further questions, we're moving to debate. Is there any?
from my point of view, I do. It's not just debate, I think that we need to do this to make sure that our elected representatives are protected, regardless of political party. I think this is a very important thing. I can't see no reason to refuse this application. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Opposed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd agree with Councillor Tom Power that I think we have a duty to protect our elected representatives, particularly the MPs. I mean, in recent memory, 2 MPs have been killed. Anything we can do to protect them and their staff, we should support. Thank you.
Yes, Kurt.
Thank you. I also come on and say that we need to protect our listed buildings. Actually, one of the key ways of protecting our listed buildings is to make sure that they still have a viable use. So I think the fact that we are reusing this, actually gives that building some life. And I would also be supporting this. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, if no one else, Councillor Webb.
Just a further point on Councillor Payne's comment. Of course, all MPs have to do this.
Yeah.
They have instructions on when to meet, who to meet, a list of who they meet, and this is all to do with this. And it's a sad state of affairs, frankly, that the murders you talk about brought this on. But it must be done.
Thank you. I echo Councillor Wales' comments there, and I think the safety of all elected officials, both MPs and us in the room, should be taken extremely seriously. Councillor Steve.
Which we say referring great benefits of actually having a parliamentary office open that's so accessible. This is a very good location for one, and the constituency has been missing a decent town centre office, so I'm really pleased Parliament's enabling this.
Okay, so it's been duly proposed by Councillor Power. If no one else has, Councillor Well.
I'd like to second it.
Councillor Road seconding that, that's good. So with it being duly proposed and seconded, have a show of hands for all those in favour. Okay, that is unanimous. Thank you very much. We'll move on to our last application, agenda item 8, number 12024, site of 41 High Street. So the tree preservation order protects one cedar tree growing in the land in the north of number 41 High Street, Ilminster, situated to the north of High Street, east of Rutters Lane. And I will hand you over to Ben to do the presentation.
Yeah.
So this has been put to the committee. Typically a CPO creation application is delegated to the tree officer, but there has been an objection, so this is now referred to committee. For the context, so particularly amazing that. This tree is at 41 High Street, Ilminster. Yeah, it's not really.
That's so bad.
Apologies for that. Hopefully it's better for people on Teams.
It's much better on Teams.
So this is a very prominent tree in the area. Got some photos there. This is it from a distance. Footpath materially in the hill. We have a view here from 41 High Street. This is the view here, 29 High Street in the back garden. And this is Rutters Lane. So you can see it's quite a common tree in the area. It first came to attention after a Section 211 notice was submitted for intent to remove a tree in a conservation area. This was on the advice of an environmental reports, which surmised that this tree had alleged propensity for limb failure, so the branches would fail. It was unsuitable for the space due to a reduced rooting environment, as there had been developments in the area historically, and there was internal basal decay. Now, the council decided at the time to retain the tree by putting a TPO on it, because it is clearly a notable and mature special specimen with good visual amenity in the area. This had support from 16 local residents who voiced concern on the creation of the 211 notice or otherwise objected to it for the reasons as follows. They objected because of the tree's age, the tree's history, the tree's considerable amenity value, the tree's values of wildlife and biodiversity. The council's commitment to enhancing tree cover should be reflected in their decisions. The arboricultural report was based on a VTA, which is a visual tree inspection, and no other survey equipment or techniques were used to establish the present or extent of decay. There were concerns that the land would be developed in the tree's absence. Other means of managing this tree whilst retaining it are possible, and climate concerns with this tree representing considerable carbon sequestration. So this TPO was created, and then there was one objection to this creation. It was not by the tree owner, it was by a neighbouring property. The two residents there, they were concerned, they had two concerns regarding this tree. There was concern about the tree's ill health after they personally witnessed falling. And they were concerned that people's lives were not being sort of considered with the creation of this TPO. Because this tree represents a hazard and it's being attacked. So, in response to this objection, I'd like to say that limb breakages on trees do occur in both healthy and unhealthy trees. It is by no means an indicator of poor tree health. The health of a tree can only truly be known through a combination of data gained through various sources, which will include VTA, as was done, but it will also include sonic tomography, chlorophyll fluorescence, climbing inspections, resi drilling. You need a comprehensive compilation of data. As well as this, the risk of limb failure can be mitigated through area pruning operations, which reduce the wind sail area, the weight of the limb, and to shorten the lever arm. So this can be done whilst retaining the tree and its associated benefits. I'd also like to say that the preservation of life is paramount. However, sufficient evidence has not been provided to show that the tree presents a significant hazard. As well as this, the tree can be managed and any current associated risk can be mitigated through area pruning, as I've said. So it's the view of the council that this TPO creation go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Question? Anyone wishes to speak for or against? So Councillor Kelly?
Yeah, I just got a quick question about liabilities. So if we decided that the tree was fine as it is and we decided to keep it there and a branch was to break off and land on somebody and kill them, what position would that put us in, having made this decision? Thank you, Chair.
So I'm not a legal professional, so my knowledge on matter is limited. My understanding is that there would need to be sufficient evidence that the tree is in poor health for liability to go back on the person responsible for the tree. So there is precedent if a tree is blown over and hurt someone, unless that tree could be discerned to be a risk through an inspection, there will be no liability. So there has been an inspection which deems this tree to be a potential risk. However, myself and the other tree officers in Somerset have decided there is not sufficient evidence for this.
Thank you. Can I just bounce that question to Jill?
Responsibility for the tree will rest with the owner of land on which it's situated. They should you'd normally expect them to have some sort of insurance for the property in any event, sort of what requires insurance. If there was an accident with a tree, if someone was injured, that insurance would come into play, but again, you would have to prove, for example, there was perhaps negligence, and that would mean that there'd be a proper programme of looking after the tree and keeping an eye on it. It probably wouldn't be negligent if something happened, because sometimes things do happen. And it would be assessed in accordance with the normal rules of land occupiers liability and personal injury.
So just to clarify, there'd be no liability on us as a council.
Not unless we own the tree.
If there are no questions, I've got one. If the landowner feels it's unsafe and thinks it runs a risk to people, and therefore is saying, I don't feel I can take responsibility for this tree, it should come down, and we're saying, no, you can't take it down, does that shift liability at all? Because we're asking someone to insure and be liable for something that they're saying they don't feel they can be liable for. I don't know which one of yours was.
It wouldn't shift liability, because I think if an application came forward supported by evidence that the tree was unsafe, we would have to look at that and consider that properly. And that's quite, that's allowed for in the tree preservation regime.
Yeah, so just to clarify, the TPO does not prevent us from working with the tree. They can submit further applications to work with the tree if more evidence comes to light about its health. It just means that those applications need to be backed by evidence.
Thank you. Councillor Seam and then Councillor Messenger.
I think just answered the point in as much as, am I right in thinking the problem here is they've come in with a do away with it altogether application, when actually there are lots of stages that should go before that, and there should be well evidence. Is that fair?
Yes.
Councillor Messenger and Councillor Osborne.
Is there any way that,
Sorry, can I hear anything?
is there any way that regular inspections could be put on if we decide to keep the tree?
Yeah, so it would be the responsibility of the tree owner. I would say that annual inspections should probably occur on a tree of this size in this proximity to targets. And if any of those inspections were to then bring to light any issues with the tree, we would then act accordingly.
Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Chairman. I've certainly not had anyone beating a path to my door about this particular application, bearing in mind that we are sent these for notification only rather than active involvement. The question I would have is, it's also interesting to note that now you've served the TPO, the objector is a neighbour, not the person who's actually owning the tree. So presumably there's been conversations there. What is the actual sort of curtilage of the tree? Do any of those branches overhang the neighbouring property, particularly two chimneys?
So the tree does not overhang two chimneys whatsoever. I have spoken to the residents, and their concerns were assuaged by my talking about the tree, but they still wanted their objection to stand as a record that they were concerned.
So this is really going to be a matter of public record. Looking at this, you've talked about annual inspection. Can that be conditioned in?
I'll be honest, I don't know at this stage. It's certainly something I can talk to the owner about to ensure this happens.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, if we discuss the tree sufficiently, does anyone wish to make a proposal on this? Excellent, Steve.
Because I concur with Gilbert Officer's recommendation on the basis, I think, to fail to do this, it would to be undermined that tree service.
Councillor Osborne, you Johnson, yes, Councillor Osborne, second, we have a show of hands for all those in favour. Okay, that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, so we move on to agenda item 9, which is the appeal decisions. They are in your agenda pack there, pages 143 to 150, and they are for noting. I'm just happy to note the appeals.
Noted.
With that in mind, we will close the meeting and see you next month. Thank you very much.